Good evening. You're watching the news at 7:30 on ATV. I'm Emily Sue.
And I'm Bo Leung. Here's a look at tonight's top stories.
Raphael Hui jailed for 7.5 years, while Thomas Kwok gets 5 years behind bars.
Democratic Party urges government to tighten rules, warning that Raphael Hui's case is just the tip of the iceberg.
North Korea suffers serious cyber attack after being blamed for hacking Sony Pictures. Former Chief Secretary Raphael Hui has been jailed for 7.5 years and fined more than $11 million for accepting nearly $20 million in bribes in Hong Kong's biggest corruption case.
Tycoon Thomas Kwok, who paid $8.5 million of that money to Hui, was given a 5-year term and fined $500,000, while the two middlemen involved received 5- and 6-year sentences.
I was there at the High Court this morning to watch the sentencing and listen to some interesting points the judge made. The 4 men convicted in Hong Kong's biggest corruption trial were brought to the High Court in Admiralty in a prison van this morning. It was sentencing day for former Chief Secretary Raphael Hui, the highest-ranking official in the city's history to be found guilty of corruption, former stock exchange official Francis Kwan, tycoon Thomas Kwok, who used to co-chair property giant San Hong Kai, and his top aide, Thomas Chan. Also in court today was Thomas Kwok's younger brother, Raymond, the sole defendant in the case who was cleared of all charges at the end of the 131-day trial. The Kwok brothers had been accused of paying Hui millions of dollars in bribes to act as their eyes and ears in government, while Chan and Kwan acted as middlemen to transfer the money. After marathon deliberations, the jury found Raymond Kwok not guilty, but convicted the other 4 on charges of bribery and misconduct in public office last Friday. Judge Andrew McRae today described the trial and the sentencing as the most difficult task in his 32-year career. McRae said he had considered they are a group of decent men who are not young, all in their 60s, but committed serious offenses. Before announcing Hui's fate, the judge noted that when he was appointed as the government's number 2 official back in 2005, he was welcomed by all as a breath of fresh air. McRae told Hui he was articulate, able and diplomatic, and if it wasn't for this case, you would have gone down in history as one of Hong Kong's finest chief secretaries. But like all tragic characters, you had a flaw, greed, or to put it more kindly, you were blinded by your desire to sustain a high life, said McRae. The judge condemned Hui for breaching his duty to act in the public's interest instead of his own, and said to know the former number 2 in government has received bribes must be a deep disappointment to many people in Hong Kong. It is vitally important in these times the Hong Kong government and business community remain and are seen to remain corruption-free, particularly when the mainland is taking obvious steps to eradicate the cancer of corruption in their own jurisdiction. Hui was facing a maximum sentence of 7 years in jail for each of the 5 counts he was found guilty of, but the judge imposed a 7.5-year term, deciding on shorter sentences for some of the charges and allowing them to be served simultaneously. McRae also ordered Hui to pay $11.182 million to the government, the largest amount he was convicted of taking. The prosecution could not prove that money came from the Kwoks, and Hui himself had indicated it came from a senior mainland official. As for Thomas Kwok, who was found guilty of bribing Hui to the tune of $8.5 million, the judge said the tycoon had deliberately made the payment in a complex way that took months, if not years, to unravel. It's an extremely severe example of this type of offense, said McRae. The judge went on to declare that although Hui did not do anything specific for Kwok while he was in public office, he's not so naive to think the payment did not create a relationship between the pair, which would allow Hui to give useful information on government thinking and policies to someone outside. McRae said Hui was kept sweet, so he would be at a favorable disposition to Kwok. Describing the billionaire as a sincere man and a genuinely motivated philanthropist, the judge sentenced Kwok to 5 years in prison and fined him $500,000. Kwok was also disqualified from becoming director of a company for 5 years. As for the 2 middlemen, Thomas Chan will be locked up for 6 years on top of a $500,000 fine, while Francis Kwan will spend 5 years behind bars. Thomas Kwok and Thomas Chan were ordered to pay $12.5 million each to help cover prosecution costs. Hong Kong's biggest corruption trial may be over, but this is not the end of the story. We're talking about men with a lot of power, influence, and above all, money, which means this could go all the way to the Court of Final Appeal.
The Democratic Party has urged the government to learn its lessons from the Rafael Hui scandal and tighten its declaration and post-retirement rules.
The party says the case could be just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to collusion between government and big business. ATV's Winnie Wong reports.
Adam Kwok was at the High Court today to see his father Thomas before he was sent to jail. He's taken over as a director of Sanong Kai. Adam's sister Noelle was also in court with her husband. When Thomas Kwok was jailed today, 31-year-old Adam approached his father in the dock and told him, "We'll be good," 3 times, to which the tycoon replied with a thumbs up. Noelle Kwok urged her father to fight on. As for Kwok's lawyers,
his proper sentence, very lenient. Quite lenient, I say.
But they're still filing an appeal. The Democratic Party today urged the government to learn its lesson from Hong Kong's biggest corruption case.
We have always said that for many decades, the policies of the Hong Kong government have inclined towards the rich, to favor them at the expense of the rest of the population. And that's why we have such a huge gap between the rich and the poor. And now, before our very eyes, we've seen evidence of such collusion. So we are very shocked, and we fear that there could be other cases. Especially now we have people going into government and then going back into the private sector and then coming back to government again through the revolving door. So the system must be tightened up to ensure maximum transparency and accountability, to make sure that these people who work for the government will not use that to benefit itself and to resort to all kinds of corrupt practices.
Lau urged the government to review its declaration of interest system and make sure the rules apply to the chief executive as well. Civic Party legislator Dennis Kwok, who represents the legal constituency, said the sentences were lighter than expected. He had been expecting around 8 to 10 years in jail for Rafael Hui. The already bankrupt former chief secretary's troubles are not over yet. The Civil Service Bureau is considering whether to stop his pension payments. Winnie Wong, ATV News.
The Democratic Party is urging the financial secretary to spend generously in his forthcoming budget and slamming him for predicting deficits while reaping surpluses.
The party also complained that the chief executive refused to meet them to hear their proposals for his policy address. In another reflection of its deep rift with the government, the Democratic Party unveiled its proposals for the forthcoming policy address and budget in front of the media this morning, instead of presenting it directly to officials. Chairman Emily Lau revealed that Chief Executive Leung Cheng-ying and his principal officials had all refused to meet them face-to-face, leaving them with no choice but to email them a copy of the policy paper. The front cover of the document, an umbrella over a yellow background, summed up the party's support for the civil disobedience campaign for greater democracy.
I want to remind everybody that it's Beijing's promise to the Hong Kong people that we can elect a chief executive by universal suffrage in 2017. It is not something that people foisted on Beijing. It's Beijing's own undertaking, but now it's reneging on its promise.
Lau said her party will not back down on its demand that the entire political reform process should be relaunched, something the government claims is impossible.
I think the main reason why so many people, including young people, took part in the occupation is that they do not think Hong Kong's policies are right. So it's not just saying, oh, you young people, you feel unhappy because of your own plight. Actually, it's the plight of all Hong Kong people, except those few who are very rich.
Veteran Democrat Albert Ho took aim at Financial Secretary John Tsang, who had warned in February that the government will see a deficit beginning next year. He ridiculed Tsang's U-turn on Sunday, predicting surpluses for the remainder of his term, which ends in 2017.
It must be either a problem of underspending or under-budgeting. The money should be properly spent. We already had a huge surplus and reserves in our treasury. What is the need of retaining such a huge surplus year after year?
A key welfare initiative announced this year, the Low-Income Working Family Allowance, has yet to be passed in LegCo due to intense filibustering by radical pan-democrats. Asked if they were to blame, Lau clarified that they fully support the scheme and have no intention to hold it back. She insisted the ball is in the government's field, as officials have so far ignored calls to prioritise the proposal, as well as a pay hike for civil servants, above more controversial items such as expanding landfills and developing new towns near the border. Potential buyers started picking up application forms today for the latest subsidised flats going on sale under the home ownership scheme.
There seems to be plenty of demand for the new flats, especially among young buyers. ATV's An Jiang reports.
Interested buyers flocked to a shopping mall in Yaotong today to look at show flats from the latest home ownership scheme projects being put on the market. The government has started inviting applications from potential home buyers interested in the 2,160 HOS flats on offer at 5 estates in Shatin, Chunwan, Tingyi, and Yunlong. These two-bedroom flats are the most basic type, spanning 438 square feet and priced at $1.8 million to $3.3 million per unit. This prospective buyer found the layout smaller than previous HOS flats, especially the kitchen and bathroom areas. Another one complained that the flats were expensive for their small size, but younger home buyers seemed generally inclined to apply for the subsidized flats. This young man said he was happy with what he saw, and the prices were better than market rates. Buyers can either get their application forms from the Housing Authority Customer Service Center in Lok Fu or download them online. Applications can be submitted from next Tuesday onwards, and those who are successful can buy their flats by next May at the earliest. An Chang, ATV News.
Overseas, North Korea has experienced an unprecedented internet outage after coming under fire for hacking other countries' internet sites.
While online services have since been restored, global cyber warfare is now firmly in the spotlight. ATV's Joyce Wu reports.
After being accused of launching a series of cyber attacks on US and South Korean targets, North Korea itself has become the victim of hackers. Pyongyang's internet was back up today, but not after an outage lasting more than 9 hours, according to US experts. The outage brought down sites run by the Korean Central News Agency and the Rodong Sinmun, major mouthpieces for Kim Jong-un's regime, according to South Korean news agency Yonhap. But there were no problems accessing pro-Pyongyang pages that have service abroad. This comes amid an escalating war of words between the US and North Korea over a serious cyber attack on Sony Pictures, which decided to scrap a Hollywood movie making fun of Kim. Washington has threatened a proportionate response and to put the country back on its terror watch list. But officials did not confirm any US involvement in the North Korean outage.
We are confident the North Korean government is responsible for this destructive attack. We stand by this conclusion. The government of North Korea has a long history of denying responsibility for destructive and provocative actions, and if they want to help here, they can admit their culpability and compensate Sony for the damages that they caused.
South Korea has also accused the North of a cyber attack on its nuclear power plant operator that resulted in a data leak. South Korean President Park Geun-hye said today that this grave situation is unacceptable. This comes as the UN Security Council formally added the situation in North Korea, including allegations of serious human rights abuses, to its official agenda. The body rejected China's objections that the Security Council is not suitable to meddle in human rights issues and that the group should not take human rights as a political issue. Washington's UN envoy was not mincing words.
North Korea also threatened the United States with serious consequences if our country did not conduct a joint investigation with the DPRK into an attack that they carried out. This is absurd. Yet it is exactly the kind of behavior we have come to expect from a regime that threatened to take, quote, merciless countermeasures, end quote, against the U.S. over a Hollywood comedy. It is incumbent on the Security Council to consider the Commission of Inquiry's recommendation that the situation in North Korea be referred to the International Criminal Court and to consider other appropriate action on accountability.
North Korean diplomats did not participate in the meeting. Joyce Wu, ATV News.
Still to come on ATV's main news tonight. Australian Prime Minister warns of increased terror threat as nation mourns Sydney hostage victims.
Music world mourns death of Joe Cocker, the man with the unforgettable voice.